So I'm Morgan, and I'm one of the directors and choreographers of Cinderella Games, which is a short film that we made in response to Christopher Wheeldon's stage production of Cinderella.
I'm Jess, and I'm the other choreographer director of the piece. And we're going to have a chat today about some questions that we've had from ENB and friends. So we're just going to talk through those. Shall I start, Morgs?
Yeah.
So the first question is, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves, your dance training, and how you started out making films?
So Jess and I met at Central School of Ballet, where we trained quite a long time ago. And after we graduated, we were both auditioning for jobs as dancers, and we were actually waiting for a bus, weren't we? And we started like making this little film on a really old Nokia. That was our first ever dance film.
We got obsessed with the whole scale thing, and basically like Morgs doing the big hand and me being the kind of, those things that people do on the Eiffel Tower and so on. We started tinkering around with that, and then I think probably because we both didn't have jobs at the time, just became really extremely obsessive about the whole thing and worked on it
really hot summer, I remember.
Yeah, it was.
And then we decided like, oh, we can film all of this outside in the street and do all these kind of funny things with bus stops, and then we sort of thought, okay, well, let's edit it together. And we entered it into a festival, which was this thing at the time called the Cobra Shorts. And you could enter like 1 minute films or something. And so we kind of put it all together and entered it for this festival. And it was accepted. And then after that, we just kept doing it, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, we're best friends. So it's a kind of, our working relationship has definitely grown out of that. And it's very intuitive, and the boundaries aren't necessarily always that defined, which, it's like the best fun in the world, kind of making work with your best friend, but it's also easy to get distracted.
Yeah.
This film that we made on the Nokia with the big hand, and we both learned how to use iMovie, and then we got really obsessed with reversing movement and making things that would normally be impossible become possible, and speeding things up, slowing them down, and basically like manipulating movement through all of the post-production stuff. So we got very obsessed with that, and I think, we're still obsessed with it in some way or shape or form.
Mm-hmm. And then I think we eventually decided, let's try and get some Arts Council funding and try and do a sort of research project and try and make something with a little bit higher production values and throw ourselves into it a little bit more.
So the next question is, could you tell us a little bit about how you first started working with English National Ballet, which I think was more, maybe you can start this one off because it came about through you, really.
Yeah. So I Tamara asked me to make a piece for their choreographic platform a good few years ago, actually, and then after that, the engagement department asked me to make a piece for the Liverpool Tate, which was like a sort of installation performance piece. And then they also said, they know that I made dance films with you, and did we want to make a dance film for the engagement department, which was to be shown at the Liverpool Tate as part of an exhibition called the Imagine Museum, which was a exhibition they were putting on inspired by this book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And Jess, you were dancing for Wayne at the time, and but you kind of had breaks in your contract, so we found a time and we made the project together, didn't we? And then from there, we made a film. So we ended up making a film based on a photograph by Martin Parr that was part of the Tate Liverpool exhibition called The Last Resort.
Oh yeah, that amazing collection of photos. I think the whole collection is called The Last Resort, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think, yeah. And there's that kind of amazing one of the ice cream, and I'm not sure quite how we got to the film that we got to, but it was partly based on that Martin Parr thing, and then this idea of the dystopia of Fahrenheit 451, and which is all about a world without art and without books and so on and so forth. And somehow it led us to this idea of a world where you have no more holidays, which is actually quite similar to lockdown life. Where you couldn't go on holiday anymore, because I think in our heads it was because we've always got very complicated backstories that nobody will ever probably get, but to us they're really important for us in getting to our ideas. But I think our backstory was like, we were living in a world where everyone was far too busy to go on holiday anymore, so they had to get hypnotized for 5 minutes to go on like a virtual holiday instead.
Yeah, it is quite locked down, isn't it, actually?
Yeah.
And the idea was that they would get hypnotized by the sort of Darren Brown character, and in reality it would only take 5 minutes, but in their hypnotized state they were kind of, having this 2-week lovely beach holiday. And then after that, so that was great, and we worked with participants that were it was in Liverpool, the project. It was based up there, so we shot up there. And then following on from that, we were asked to make as a response to Akram's Giselle as a curtain raiser.
That was quite soon after, I think, actually.
Yeah.
I think the last resort was 2015, and then I think we actually finished, the film kind of got completed in January, and already by the summer, by the autumn that year, we were talking about the next film. So that 2016 we made Curing Albright, didn't we?
Yeah. And that was in Manchester. Yeah.
And then so that was the second one, and then the third one was Cinderella Games, which brings us to our next question.
So I'm going to ask you this, Jess.
Oh dear, here we go.
Where did the idea of Cinderella Games first come from, and how did it change when you were developing the concept?
Well, the idea for Cinderella Games first came from kind of, I think actually a lot of our ideas, they're always born out of, I'm not going to say problems because it sounds negative, but kind of problems in like a positive sense, like circumstances. And we're quite good at problem solving, or kind of figuring out things within like quite tight parameters. So in this instance, we were asked to respond to Christopher Wheeldon's Cinderella, which was on at the Round in the Royal Opera House. The second
Royal
thing
Albert
was,
Hall.
Royal Albert Hall. And the second thing was that we were actually going to be able to use the Royal Albert Hall. So they came on board as partners with the MB. So we were like, this is amazing. We've got this incredible theatre space, which then kind of came with various complications, such as we weren't actually allowed to film on the stage itself because of the production that was going on at the same time. So then we kind of came into questions of, okay, how do we use a theatre space not as a theatre space? How do we reframe that? And then on top of it, it was again a participation project, this time an intergenerational one, with a really broad, diverse group of participants. I think our youngest was about 16 and our eldest was 79, Stella. So we kind of had all those things to play with, and within that we were like, okay, which things from Cinderella are we interested in doing? And I think we felt like we didn't want to just do a retelling of the 5-minute, because the film was going to be 5 minutes, so we didn't want to just do a retelling of the Cinderella story as we know it, which has already been done, and we didn't feel that we could necessarily do that in five minutes. So I think we thought about like kind of picking elements, or like almost riffing on different motifs that were in there. And we came up with this idea. I don't know, I can't remember exactly how we came up with it, Morgs, but
we were talking about, we were quite interested in this, the shoe trying on scene, and the idea of kind of like finding your one and only, or true love, or happy ever after through trying on a shoe, and the shoe fitting, and the sort of the kind of the element of luck, and the sort of arbitrariness of that, and also the kind of the game element of that whoever tries on the shoe wins the prince and wins happiness. And then that made us think about the content, games.
That's true. The whole idea of happily ever after and just being able to win it as a prize. We kind of thought that was something worth exploring. And then we kind of, we'll come to that a bit later, that we had these 2 different locations, so we had all these different elements that we had to kind of try and weave a story out of. And somehow I think maybe we'd just been watching Hunger Games as well, but we always want to create these kind of slightly weird dystopian worlds, which in our minds are quite dark, but they never end up being that dark. But we kind of had this idea, didn't we, that like, what if Cinderella had never been found? So what if at the end of the Cinderella story, it was actually left on a cliffhanger or a question mark? Fast forward into the future and everybody's, you know, the prince is really old, even though we don't kind of show a prince in our version of it, but they're still looking for her. And how can you prove you're the real Cinderella? And you have to go through a series of tasks to prove yourself. And we wanted to kind of create this really high stakes drama around what would you be willing to risk in order to kind of get your happily ever after, you know, how far would you go? So I don't know whether this comes across in the film, you guys can tell us after you've seen it, but it probably doesn't actually. It's again probably one of those things that was important for us, but it's not necessarily spelt out in the way that we tell it. But we had this idea that you go into the games, and if you can prove yourself, you can win your happily ever after, and if you can't, you in turn have to wear the boiler suit and become part of the machine that runs the game. So yeah, that was pretty much the starting point, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then I guess it develops quite a lot because I don't know whether Jess, you already said this, but like we work a lot with like locations as starting points as well, because we're always really interested in the kind of the architecture and making the choreography around that, which we did a lot in Curing Albrecht, and that's normally like a really important stage, is finding the location and that it inspires kind of movement, or we can imagine how that would work on film. And so then we had the Royal Albert Hall, but we had quite limited shooting time available in Royal Albert Hall and rehearsal time, so we found another location, which was the incredible Kempton Steam Museum in, where is it? It's near Twickenham?
It's kind of far out from Twickenham, but it's most famous for the Kempton racecourse, I think. There's like a big famous racecourse there.
And it is a sort of it's another sort of big Victorian building. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, as you can see in the film. It's amazing treasure. And so we knew we just looked at it and we kind of imagined immediately, you know, shots and movement and choreography and how we could kind of make it all sort of sing and come to life. And so we kind of often like approach things from several different angles, don't we? So we had the idea of the Cinderella and what from the fairy tale, which elements we were interested in, or what things kind of sparked ideas. And then we also had bits from the Prokofiev score, which we were really, really keen to use. And we had certain tracks, you know, bits from that. Like we loved the Midnight Allegro track with the tick-tock of the clock, that really spoke to us. And then we had this, like, these two locations, and
the group of participants as well, again,
and the participants of the cast. Yeah, so then from there it was kind of like Jess was saying, like a big kind of working out how all of these elements might tie together and work together, which in some ways is like a bit of a head wrecker. Like we always spend a lot of time thinking like, how is this going to work? But then on the other hand, it makes you know, kind of think of solutions you would, you know, if you throw all these different other things in the mix, makes you think of solutions you would never otherwise have come to if you kind of went at it in a totally linear sort of rational way.
Yeah, I think maybe what's different about how we worked on all of the A and B films to how a lot of people approach filmmaking, and how, you know, we've actually just made another film which was from a completely different point of view. We made a film about the famous ballerina Maria Taglioni, and that was very much, we had a script from the get-go and we were very clear about the story, and then based on that script we went and we sought out the location we wanted, the cast that we wanted, etc., etc. So it was kind of quite a typical way of working in that sense. Whereas I think, you know, we've been so fortunate with these films to have the Royal Albert Hall, Kempton. For Curing Albrecht, we worked in these spectacular Victorian baths in Manchester, and really, but in those situations, because we're using location as a starting point, it's kind of almost like, what industry could they, you know, what sort of industrious movement might they be doing, what stories could be woven. You know, we often think about like what choreographic ideas we like, within the context of those locations, and then try to weave a narrative out of that. So yeah, it's a lot of bashing our heads against the wall for quite a long time trying to make sense of it in terms of the story emerging, but it's usually quite fun to see what comes out, because it's not the same as if we would sit down and kind of think, this is the story we have to tell, and then realize it.
So Jess, I'm going to ask you now, how do your filmmaking techniques influence your choreography and vice versa?
Well, I think it happens for us very intuitively, in that, kind of going back to how we first started making films, you know, you were always behind the camera framing things, and I was always in front of it prancing around. And so I think we still kind of hold on to those roles to some extent, and we really do things, I'd say, like very simultaneously. I think we do a lot of kind of what if, or if then, you know, you kind of go like, oh, this is a really cool angle for the camera, if I had it down here, what could you do? And then I kind of like think, oh, well, maybe I could land into it by jumping down and catching it. Or I might say, oh, this is a really cool corridor, you know, like I can imagine traveling down here, what would that, you know, like how could we film that?
Yeah.
And then you know, and then unless it's kind of really interesting from both aspects, we don't normally follow through on it. So because dance on film is so different from dance on stage, so I would say we work really simultaneously in that way. I don't know if that's answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess as well, so we often work with Matty Piltz, who's our director of photography, and he shot Curing Albrecht and Cinderella Games. And so I guess our process changed a little bit when we started working with him, because then we would sometimes actually kind of devise a bit of choreography and then talk to him and discuss how we would shoot it. So, but even then I think we would kind of think, oh, this is how we were imagining, possibly this is the angle we were imagining possibly seeing it from. But even then the choreography would be devised like around the space, wouldn't it? It would be like around the corridor, or around, like in Cinderella Games, you know, we immediately saw the booths of the Royal Albert Hall, and kind of all the different levels, and the kind of different levels up and down, and also different areas of depth. And just that, to us, we could see so much possibility for sort of interesting,
that grid-like, it's like a grid-like structure, which is kind of similar to what we had in Curing Albrecht, which, you know, I think as soon as we see those, we imagine, because the space is already segmented in a kind of vertical and horizontal way, so it's kind of thinking about the whole thing. Usually those spaces, you know, they're the most exciting for us to imagine on a wide shot, and how the whole space can function as a choreographic object, and how the different layers can kind of interlink and connect. So yeah, like definitely very led by the spaces as well, I would say. Shall I ask you the next question, or have you got anything else?
No, go next question.
So next question, I think we've touched on this a bit already, but could you talk a little bit about the Royal Albert Hall and the Kempton Steam Museum, how the spaces inspired you artistically, and what the logistics, challenges, surprises or benefits of filming there? And what were the logistics, challenges, surprises or benefits of filming there?
Well, the logistics of the Royal Albert Hall was access mainly, wasn't it? Because it's a really busy, well, obviously not at the moment, but then it was extremely busy venue. So again, kind of getting time in there was just extremely precious. And because we need to devise around the choreography, we wanted to devise it around the space. We really needed to be in there, because even though we could work out something in the studio, we'd work out some phrases in the studio, once we put them in the boxes, they didn't look the same, or the distance from one pillar to the other, it took longer, and the council had to change, and so we really needed to be doing it on location. So that
we mocked up the studio, didn't we? We kind of, because we couldn't get in there very often. I mean, I think our dream would be to just be like constantly devising on location in a dream world, or on a set
or something.
Build a set, but we mocked it up like in the studio, and kind of did all the dimensions of the space, and tried our best to do it that way, but it was kind of ever changing.
And then when it came to shooting, it was obviously like very, very expensive to light, and it was kind of quite a lot of work to get all the lights in all the different boxes. And I think Matty and Bernard worked really, you know, the gaffer, the lighting, department crew worked really hard on the film to kind of make all those boxes come alive, and that's, because it's just so vast, wasn't it, which is why it looks so spectacular and amazing. But yeah. And what about the pump rooms?
Oh, they were amazing as well. I don't know, I feel like the biggest challenge for us really was we had these two absolutely spectacular locations. We knew that they had something in common because they were both really epic and the kind of Victorian and just like visually so rich and stunning. But I think the biggest challenge for us was like, how do we create a narrative that cohesively ties these two spaces together?
Okay, so should we do one more question about the
Let's do one more quick question. How was it working with dancers across such a range of age and dance style backgrounds for Cinderella Games? To what extent is the choreography shaped or inspired by the dancers you work with?
I mean, I think we like, because all of our work is quite character driven, so having such a range of like brilliant performers was quite inspiring for us in terms of developing the narrative as well. So we obviously we did the once we met, that we had like a casting day and workshop day, and then once we met the participants that are going to be in the film, we then from there kind of like then sort of started developing the characters, didn't we?
Yeah.
So that was again the same thing, like coming at it from different angles.
It's a really large cast. I think we had about 35 dancers in total.
Yeah.
And it was also, it was also kind of logistically a real challenge because obviously we wanted to get information out to people on time and so on and so forth. But kind of us, for our heads, trying to work out in a studio context who might be in which part of a location in the Royal Albert Hall at which time with who, and does that add up, and calling people in their kind of right groups was, it was quite a lot of organisation for us. But it definitely, I think it was the biggest cast we've ever worked with actually. But it was really exciting, and again to kind of try and highlight and draw out the best from everybody in the cast.
And there's something really exciting about working with like a big group on something like that, on a big location, because by the time it came to the end of the sort of the second shoot day and we were shooting those big scenes, and so many people have to coordinate together, and it really needs everybody to be, because when you're shooting you'll only have, even though of course it's not a live performance on stage, you'll maybe have like 10 minutes to get a certain shot. So it is really, really high stakes, and all of the, everything's set up and the time's rolling, and it's kind of, it has got a real sense of performance to it. And so when we were doing that, I just remember, when we were doing that big sort of grid shot, like it's really exciting. Everyone really has to sort of pull together, and there's a real sense of because there's all the crew and then all the dancers, and there's a real sense of, I don't know, like,
it's really thrilling, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's it's like, it's such a, everyone knows that every single part has to work in order for it to be okay, and everybody, it's not, everybody just implicitly understands the nature of the high stakes time crunch, giving a great performance, but then maybe like the light wasn't quite right, or there was a boom shadow or something or other like that. So every single aspect needs to be okay in order for us to move on to the next shot, and that's kind of got its own really performative and thrilling and like adrenaline infused atmosphere to it, in a completely different way from live performance. But yeah.
Cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoy Cinderella Games, and would love to know what you think, and please share it if you enjoy it. And thanks to everyone that was in it and made it happen. You guys were awesome.
We can't wait to share it. Bye.
Ciao.